Hello again. We are well into, that is if we go in the order that we have done little introductions, for the rebroadcasting of the series we originally started recording, at METV Studios of Bradenton, Florida, back in the early part of the last decade. We are now into August of 2003, when we sat down with our dear friend and former fellow NBC colleague. I'm talking 30 Rock now. I was the radio network at one end of the 8th floor, and just around the corner, NBC Nightly News. Not just on the 8th floor, they had several. But the vice president of Nightly News in those days was a gentleman named Bill Corrigan, William T. Corrigan. Lived right here with us in Venice, Florida, and died just a few years ago. But while he was there, with Brokaw coming up in the business, with John Chancellor bowing out, and so on, the names that are so familiar today, Huntley Brinkley and all that sort of thing, Bill Corrigan was there with his press credential, traveling all over the world with these people that you and I are so familiar with for our nightly news coverage. And Bill and I got to be good friends, as Bill did with just about everybody he knew. He was a very, very loyal member of the Broadcast Pioneers, to which we are still members, although these days we call it the Broadcasters of Florida. But nonetheless, Bill Corrigan, a great broadcast pioneer and a former colleague and friend who we lost, as I said, a couple of years ago. William T. Corrigan, Vice President of NBC Nightly News. Sit back and enjoy. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Broadcast Biographies, produced here in the studios of METV in Bradenton, Florida. I'm your host, Don Blair. Our guest for this episode, this chronology of a career, is William T. Corrigan, Bill Corrigan, as he was known to all of us who roamed the halls of 30 Rockefeller Plaza, lo those many years ago. And I think you were there before me.
Yes.
And I'm sure after we left and went to new studios up on Broadway. Bill Corrigan, we start always in the same mode. You've got to take us back to where the beginning was, where you were born and brought up, what was your schooling, and what catapulted you into this crazy business of ours.
Well, I was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In 1921.
Didn't have to tell us that.
Well, when you're 82, that's
everybody wonders, yes.
That's the good thing of feeling, hey, I'm still alive and
yes.
about. At any rate, I grew up in Bridgeport, the industrial capital of Connecticut.
It sure is. I live nearby.
And all my life, from the time I was a toddler, once I gave up the idea of being a fireman, I wanted to be a newsman.
In light of recent history, I think that was a wise decision.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be a reporter, and in grammar school, I found that I enjoyed writing, and in high school, the same.
You end up on the school newspaper or anything that pedestrian?
I was editor of the high school yearbook.
Is this still in Bridgeport?
Yes, still in Bridgeport, okay. Central High.
Oh, sure, yeah. And, still there.
Yep. We had a football team, 1938, the year I graduated. Yeah. Lost every game.
Lost every game? I was just going to say Bridgeport had that reputation of being a tough school with tough football teams.
Yeah. Well, the following year after I graduated, they won the state championship, didn't lose a game, and rubbed everyone's nose in it.
You never took that personally, did you?
No, I was just very, very happy.
So where did you step into another field of education?
When I graduated, I had two things at graduation. I won the Barnum Prize, a prize left by P.T. Barnum.
Our viewers should know that Bridgeport was, just like John Ringling is very, very situated in Sarasota here, that our friend Barnum.
Well,
Bridgeport is synonymous with Barnum.
Bridgeport was his home,
Yep.
and the circus used to winter quarter
Oh, yes.
in Bridgeport, and my mother, they had big brick buildings, and I vaguely remember my mother said she wheeled me down there on winter days to see the
Elephants and stuff.
all of them, the
All of
elephants, the trapeze artists.
Of course, there was a time when they would load them onto trains and take them down to Venice, Florida.
Right.
And those days are gone forever.
But there was a fire. I think that was in 1927,
Ooh.
and that's when the circus moved to Sarasota.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
At any rate, it was a pleasant, happy time for
So
me
where did
growing
you
up.
did you hit college in that area?
Yeah, at graduation I got the Barnum Prize. This was for an essay that had to be spoken and delivered at graduation. 5 essays were picked, and to do this, and I came out number 1, won the Barnum Prize, which was,
To bring you any kind of a scholarship aid or anything?
well, no, cash.
Cash?
Yeah.
Oh, that's like Yogi Berra would say, it's just as good as money, isn't it?
Yes, I guess it was
I guess
at
it
that
was,
time.
yeah.
At any rate, I also won a scholarship from a newspaper, the Bridgeport Herald. It was a great paper. It was the sort of paper, it was a weekly, and the sort of paper people bought it on Sunday mornings leaving church. But they always bought another paper to hide the fact that they
were
had the
buying the
Herald,
Herald.
because sometimes the Herald ran red streamer headlines, and
Oh,
the
gee.
motto was "No fear, no favor, the people's paper."
Oh, wow.
But it was a great paper and it was statewide, for its coverage of sports, politics, and sex.
They could probably get the Saturday football games in for that edition.
Oh, absolutely.
But for the rest of the time, it was old news.
The publisher and owner selected me for a scholarship they gave because I had said, and he told me at the time he interviewed me, "Don't tell me you want to be a reporter. You can win this, you can be anything you want, but don't, if you win it,
Yeah.
but don't tell me, don't curry favor with me, boy."
What was he trying to say, Bill? That this is not the greatest
He was-
world to work in?
He just was telling me,
Warning you.
warning me, don't say this because
Yeah.
you think it will
Please.
help.
Yeah.
It won't help a damn bit, but if you want to do it, wonderful.
So you did it anyway.
I did it anyway, and he said, don't, for heaven's sakes, don't take journalism as a major in college.
So did you disregard that advice?
No, I regarded it.
And what college?
Well, I started at what is now the University of Bridgeport,
Okay.
and after 2 years, at the end of my sophomore year, we'd run out of money, and I left at that time and was working as a management trainee at Remington Arms, owned by DuPont.
Was that New Haven?
No, in Bridgeport.
In Bridgeport.
In Bridgeport.
Because that's also a very famous name in Connecticut.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes. Well, at any rate, I still wanted more, and so after I got out of service, I went down to Washington to the American University
Oh, okay.
and finished.
Which is still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I finished because I had picked up some credits going to night school when, in 1940, I had dropped out.
So going to school at American, did that mean necessarily that you could step right out of school and into a job in this business in Washington, or did it take you elsewhere?
No, I stepped right out of it. I had great good fortune of being in graduate school, and there was an opening at NBC.
NBC, all right.
Part-time work on weekends, and I took it. Why not? I needed it.
Doing exactly what?
Lord, I did everything from answering the phone to...
Going for coffee?
Yeah. I was a gopher.
Yeah. Well, that's typical. We all did it.
Odd jobs
Sure.
of wherever there was something.
If you want the business bad enough, you'll do the menial things
Right.
to inculcate yourself into the good favor of the boss.
Indeed.
Yeah, yeah. I want to find out, when did you actually sink your teeth into what became your life's work?
1948, they offered me full-time as
This WRC or was
WRC. Well, WRC was a known station.
Yes, and it was radio
and
only then.
it was radio.
Yeah.
Television was just starting, and they had, when I came aboard, they were still doing some of it in the big main Studio A, and shortly after I came aboard full-time, they moved to the television up to the old Wardman Park Hotel. And at the same time, they brought in some cameramen, film cameramen, and they moved them. There wasn't space for everything in the Translux, so they...
Translux Theater?
Translux Theater was down on the ground floor, and
Is that still there, or is that history?
I have no idea.
I would imagine it's given way
You know,
to
as
something
far
more
as a
important.
newsreel theater, it's
Yeah,
gone.
right,
but
right.
whether it's an art house or...
So 1948 was your inaugural.
Yeah,
Okay, part-time, but then they
part-time,
brought
but
you in
very
full-time.
quickly
When you say full-time, I don't mean full-time going for coffee. You had something
I
more
dropped
respectable
out
to
of
do.
graduate. I was in graduate school, and I dropped out. I was just getting ready to write my thesis, and I dropped out. Full-time work in a business I wanted to be.
Right.
And I was working as a writer,
Yeah.
but not solely in news, primarily for the production, for the bread and butter of the station.
What was the bread and butter?
Bread and butter was doing all sorts of things.
Or did they have the morning show with the kitchen and the cooking and all that kind of stuff?
They
that we saw
had, but
early
I
on?
didn't do that. But I
Kitty
was
shows?
farm editor.
Farm editor?
Farm editor, a city boy.
Okay.
I was farm editor, and I started getting magazines right away from all over, trade magazines. The Duroc Journal, the Durocs, the big white hog that grows faster on less feed. And they deluged me with mailings. And I had a morning show. I think it came on at 6 in the morning.
You had a morning show. You mean
I
you
didn't do
you
it.
wrote for it.
I wrote it.
Right. Was this in the days when Godfrey was a kind of a kingpin in Washington radio?
No, he was already in New York.
He was already there,
already in New York.
making his mark.
Yeah, but he was well remembered in Washington.
Sure, sure.
The store still had that got him fired. Still had the big dirty white bear, about 7 feet tall, and it had been white, and it was crummy looking, but it was still there.
So here we're into the late 40s now, are we not?
Yeah, and
Okay.
I was writing the farm show because, and Harry Truman was president, and he listened to that every morning when he got up to 6.
I can understand that.
He had been a farmer.
He was a farm boy.
And so I put the thing together with closing prices on various
Commodities. Corn, wheat, stuff
yep,
like that.
Yep. And then tips from the agriculture department.
Mm-hmm.
Funny bit, the announcer who did the voice stuff, one particular, I took the handout and went through it and say, hey, that's interesting. And I edited the thing, but didn't retype or anything, and put it in the pile for him to use. Well, this was a story about oats. How to improve your crop of oats. And sow your oats at least, I don't know.
Sounds like exciting stuff.
4 inches. Well, at 6 in the morning, any fool who's listening
That's right.
would have been all right. How deep to sow your oats, and how frequently they should, what type of fertilizer to improve the yield, that sort of thing. What I didn't realize was that in my hurry, I had neglected to note that however, the typewriter that had done the original, the O was malformed and had been worn, and so it came out C. So now if you want to improve your yield of cats, sow your cats so many inches.
And he just dutifully read it.
He went through it because this
straight
was
face
it.
and all.
And he just finished, and he said, now, I realized suddenly that I've been made a terrible mistake. If you would substitute O for the C and oats for cats, it will make sense to you too.
Yeah, but you had one of the early bloopers. Listen, let's get you into the business.
All right. I was then moved into the news, onto the hard news side as a writer.
We're still doing radio here.
Still doing radio, and doing that, writing 5-minute shows to be done by the announcing staff.
That's a bone of contention, and I intended to bring it up, but probably later in the show, but you've hit on it already. The announcer reading news given to him by a news writer. I've spent almost 50 years in this business, and many of those years defending the fact that we could write our own stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the days when there were readers?
Yes.
But there was a period in there, I wish I knew the exact time, it probably was a period of years, when they made a transition. And the only reason you were hired in New York or Washington is because you were good enough to write your own stuff.
Yeah, well, that hadn't happened yet. Mm-hmm. But the interesting point was that at all the 3 networks, for special events, used announcers.
Yes.
Because they had control of their thought and voices, and did a marvelous job.
They did a good job, sure.
Strictly ad lib.
Yeah.
And they could be trusted. So.
Were there any announcers who, because they were that facile and that quick thinking, could do cold work and so forth, that actually transitioned into the news business? I'm just trying to think of any that go back a long way, because we all started. Well, we didn't start as hard-nosed newsmen.
Doug Edwards on CBS.
Sure.
Douglas Edwards had been. Brinkley was very annoyed because Brinkley had served with UP in Atlanta, and Doug was in radio in Atlanta, and
probably doing music and all kinds of good things. And he didn't think he did his time.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
He didn't earn his
he hadn't earned his stripes or his credentials.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But that's the way it went.
Yeah. All right. Listen, if we can take any shots between us, we've got a wall full of your press passes.
Yeah.
And way down at the bottom in the left-hand corner, if I'm not mistaken, or close to the bottom left-hand corner,
I think it's a press pass that may go back as far as 1953. Was that CBS?
Well, let's see. 53.
53.
53, I was with NBC.
West Coast?
No, in Washington.
In Washington.
This is the White House.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, we got a good shot. Look at that. You can see the many lives of William Corrigan.
Oh, yeah.
You can see without beard, without goatee.
And with dewlaps.
Yes, and all that stuff. But that's a great board, which Bill has, of course, in his home. And I've got a handful of those laying around, drawers and desks at my home. And they're nice mementos. And now I know why they're still sitting there, because be easy to pick them up and say, get rid of them. But that's your history there. That's your life.
Well, they were all ones that I felt I wanted to.
We had a picture that I think I'm going to slide right by if we can, guys. Bill, just about at the time of his retirement. You got a picture there in our book that shows Bill in the center. There's his retirement photo. And when did you step? No, when did you step down?
When?
When did you quit?
August 19th.
It was mid-'80s.
1981.
81?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
I've been retired for 22 years.
22? Guess you're way ahead of me.
And still breathing.
I didn't get out till 1989. But then the next shot, which I originally thought, and you'll see why, had you in Hawaii, you corrected me as we were driving up here this morning. That's not Hawaii, that's Tahiti.
It was in Papeete, Tahiti.
And tell me what that is all about. And that's CBS now.
Yes, at that time I was news director of KNXT in Los Angeles.
Big station. Now what happened? You were working for NBC. You would think you'd died and gone to heaven and stay there the rest of your life, and yet you end up with CBS West.
Well, I was I was manager, Washington bureau chief of the television news for CBS.
Aha.
And they decided that Sam Zellman, who was news director of KNXT, was doing a grand job, and they moved him to New York.
Oh.
And I allowed as how I would be very interested in the job.
Oh.
And went through interviews, and okay, I went out there to be news director.
So this Tahiti picture we have
the Tahiti was
with the lays around your neck. What was that all about?
There was a new French airline, TIA, I believe it was called. I'm not sure.
I think you're right.
And they were going to have weekly flights to Papeete, Tahiti, and to inaugurate it, they had a junket, and
I love those junkets.
Went out for 10 days. They were all perfectly acceptable at that time.
Yeah.
And I went out, and we had a grand time.
Gee whiz, I mean, 10 days?
10
couldn't have been too much hard news work out there.
No, wasn't a bit of it. The only thing that slightly resembled it was when I was in Los Angeles, I was West Coast bureau chief for CBS, and one of my jobs was to ensure coverage through affiliates or sending a crew of our own, if necessary, to an area.
When you say sending a crew, now you're talking film?
Film.
Sound?
Yes, sound.
Light.
And
today it's one man. Then it was 4, 5, or 6,
yes,
including yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they asked me if I'd, they, meaning New York, Don Hewitt asked if I'd...
Don Hewitt?
Don Hewitt, yeah.
That's a name that should be familiar to everybody.
Well, at that time, he was producing the nightly news with Doug Edwards before he invented 60 Minutes.
And he did, too.
Yeah. And at any rate, I went up. They asked me to go up to Alaska and function as the director and correspondent, and do some stories on I think they were the 59ers. The people, there'd been big layoffs in the automotive industry in Detroit, and a group of ill-advised people decided that they would move out of the Detroit area and go to Alaska, where they could get 60 acres free of charge if they cleared it out in 10 years.
Yeah.
And they bought trailers
Grub stakes.
and drove the family up to Alaska.
Well, good luck to them.
Yeah. So that was to be my prime story, what happened to the 59ers.
Oh, I see.
And nothing much had happened. They were lazy people. They had been helped by so many and were adjusted to getting handouts. They were ill prepared for the cold weather, and they didn't really want to work.
You don't go to Alaska and not work.
No, and I don't think they had had a full summer there, and I don't think any of them cleared more than an acre of land.
Yeah. Probably got oil pipelines running across it now.
No, but this was up in Talkeetna.
Oh, yes.
And
I've been to Alaska, and I know what you mean.
in sight of Mount McKinley.
Oh, yes.
But I went up there with the cameraman and I. He was a one-man band. He did his own sound.
Oh, that's unusual.
Yeah, it was, but it was cheaper. So I spent, 3.5 weeks up there. I got home Christmas Eve day, and up there in the 3.5 weeks, I flew in 18 different aircraft.
Oh boy! Real Alaskan type. What?
Yeah.
Pontoons and all
Every
that kind
place
of
you
good stuff?
went, you had to fly.
Yeah, sure.
Because there were no roads.
Oh yeah, that's where the mailman.
And plenty
worked
of snow.
in place, yeah.
And so with ski planes
Yeah,
of different type of
Right.
planes with skis, and getting out and pulling the wing, helping to pull the wing around to get into the wind, that sort of thing.
Yes,
So
yes.
it was interesting. Then I did a story on oil. First oil leases were auctioned off, and I did a story on
Wow.
that. Pardon?
Way below, before the oil pipeline
Yeah.
and everything. Way
Yeah.
before.
And then I did another story on the first business, big and major investment by a company in Alaska since statehood. And the first business was pulp.
Wood pulp?
Wood pulp
Paper.
business, Japanese money.
Oh, really? Wasn't
And this was-
Abitibi or anything like that?
Pardon?
I'm thinking of a company called Abitibi, that
No.
Japanese
no,
company.
No, this was a Japanese company, but with an anglicized name. I can't tell you the
I
name
see.
now. I don't
Yeah,
remember it.
yeah.
And it was on an island off. We had to fly to it from Juneau and Sitka.
Sitka.
In Sitka.
Famous World War II
Yeah,
spot.
and they had built a factory, the whole bit, and
So you did a story there.
I did a story there. I did a story on a retirement home in Alaska, in Juneau. Or was it? No, it was in Sitka, and it was so because there were people still living who had been born during the gold rush or
Oh, wow. Yeah.
or were kids during the gold rush when their parents took them to Alaska. And I remember it was so cold that I in doing my intro and stand-upper, it was so cold I couldn't talk.
Oh, yeah.
I
can believe that.
The wind was in my face and my lips were cold, so we went back to the hotel after he filmed me holding the mic up right up next to me, not saying, moving my jaws, but not saying anything.
Don't touch the mic to your
And
mouth.
then there was a window in the hotel room opened on an air shaft. It was out of the wind, but yet you had all of the noise of it. And I took the mic and just used it as I would for radio.
I want to get us in out of the cold. I'm
Yeah.
freezing sitting here. I've got a picture here of you with a camera crew, and there's two gentlemen sitting on long steps. It looks very Washingtonian.
No, that's in Delaware.
Delaware.
Yeah, the
that
University
is
of
Pete
Delaware.
Hackis there, isn't it?
Yeah, Peter Hackis.
Pete Hackis is on the left sitting,
Yes.
and there's an Oriental gentleman on his
And
on
he
his
is
left.
a Korean,
Korean.
North Korean,
Okay.
who flew, he was a North Korean pilot, and he flew the first MiG
Oh, he
over
defected.
and defected.
Ah, that's the guy.
And this is
This
where
was CBS.
this is CBS, and Ralph Santos was my cameraman,
Uh-huh.
and I was pleased.
That's you standing behind the camera
Well, yeah,
with glasses on.
yep.
No beard or anything at that.
No, clean shaven.
Uh-huh. Next picture, folks, identified. We're still in the 1950s, and in this shot, you'll see Bill in the middle, in the foreground. Again, we have the glasses. I don't know if you exactly recall who is that. Now you're NBC, and this was, you said,
This was MacArthur's.
MacArthur's return
When
from Korea.
MacArthur returned from Korea,
Okay.
because Harry Truman fired him.
Absolutely.
And after making his farewell speech to the joint session of joint meeting of the Congress,
Mm-hmm.
and saying old soldiers never die, they just fade away.
Right. Now, you were outside here.
This was on the grounds of the Washington Monument,
Okay, was
where
Mac there? Was
people
MacArthur
had
there?
supporters of
Oh, yeah.
MacArthur had rallied, and MacArthur drove from the Capitol down to the Washington Monument grounds, and Johnny Batchelder was doing the voice,
Oh, I see. Okay.
and
So by this time,
This
I'm
was
looking
in-
at the logo on the mic. You're with NBC.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was still with NBC. This
Were you a producer, writer,
I
director,
was a
what?
producer, writer,
Everything.
a jack of all trades.
Yeah, that's very typical.
And on something of this sort, television couldn't do much with it other than the appearance on the Hill,
Mm-hmm.
and radio, though, was big
Oh, sure.
with it, and
Yeah.
was able to travel and go live all the time. So that was what the purpose.
Now we've got a picture of a man I think most of our viewers will recognize, a man that ran unsuccessfully for president, I think, on more than one occasion.
Yeah, twice.
Got the unfortunate nickname of Egghead because he was so literate.
Yes.
He was almost above the crowd,
Absolutely.
like Abba Eban in Israel. So articulate, no Israeli could understand him. But Attlee was almost too good for the
Yeah,
he
and-
wasn't plain speaking.
No.
He was very, very elegant. And there on the right, with the microphone on your chest, again, still waiting to grow that beard, Bill, is you on the right.
Yep.
And this is 1956.
Yep.
This is the Chicago Convention.
Right.
Okay, he was the Democratic nominee.
Democratic nominee. He was coming from the hotel, his hotel, to the convention floor the night he was nominated. He knew that he was being nominated, and he came over to accept the nomination.
Right.
And I was one of a great throng, but I was able to, I had learned enough to elbow my way through,
You have to.
and I got the first interview with him.
Right. Politeness doesn't get you anywhere in the news
No.
business. You got to elbow your way in
Yep.
or step on your
Yeah,
colleague's foot.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah.
So, but this picture made the front page.
Well, you were operating in this mode as a reporter.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you
With
wore
a
all
film.
the hats.
Yeah. with the film crew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the same convention where the cameraman, one of the cameramen I had, lost, what was it? I know, had his hand camera failed, his Filmo.
Oh, yeah.
But he had a sound camera.
Mm-hmm.
So I put him on my shoulders so he could hold the camera, and I carried him around the floor of the convention to get stuff that otherwise wouldn't have
Isn't it
been.
wonderful what we can do when we're younger and,
Yeah.
and stronger?
Of course,
and
when I
everything
got back to the hotel early the following morning, I found that I had perspired, saturated my tie, and just the dye was into my shirt.
Lovely. Listen, I want to move up now to a picture of a couple of gentlemen on when you and I get together, as we do often, for a lunch at an organization in this area called the Media Roundtable.
Yeah.
They always put our names down in a number so that everybody around the table who may not have known us before knows who we are, and a one-line resume where you were. It just covers very quickly, the fact that I went to New York, worked for all the networks, etc. The one that always sticks out after the name Bill Corrigan is Huntley Brinkley.
Yeah.
With all the other wonderful credentials you carry, CBS and a writer and a cameraman and everything else, when it says executive producer of the Huntley Brinkley Report, that just, to me, and to most people, would leap right off the page. Now would you call that the highlight? The high spot in your career?
Pretty close.
Certainly a prestige association.
Yeah, it was a prestigious job, but it was a fun job because I worked Washington. I was manager of the Washington Bureau.
Okay.
And David and I, we knew each other from the time when he was just getting started.
Well, he was a newspaper writer, too.
He had been a newspaper man and came over.
As was Chet.
He was with UP in Washington.
And Huntley was I think UP or AP West Coast or something
West
like
Coast,
that?
Yeah. But David and I got along well, and then I did the newsreel, the nightly newsreel for NBC. And
yeah, you were telling me all this in the car on the way up, and I don't want to thrash this to death because it is really ancient history.
Yeah.
But there was a time when there was an NBC newsreel, as you call it, and no classic anchor in the Doug Edwards or Cronkite tradition, or even Huntley or Brinkley.
No,
it was a voiceover man.
Strictly a voiceover.
I could barely even remember that, and I thought I was pretty good going back into television history. But boy, that was pretty dry stuff, and old.
Yeah.
Old news.
Well, yes, but at the time, there was no cable connection.
Of course not.
And
no
there were
satellites.
no satellites, so that if you were in Phoenix, you might, with luck, have. I don't think they were cabled yet. So as a result, this was your first shot at anything like
well, even as
network
the
news.
VHS cassette is falling into disfavor today.
Yeah.
And most young people around us wouldn't be caught dead with a VHS. It's got to be DVD and all this, CDs and so forth. But then we're in the film world, and people today, even the boom generation, the boomers, the baby boomers, have very little appreciation of the fact that film had to be shot, rushed back to a laboratory, souped, edited, spliced, put together. It wasn't war in your living room live as it is now.
No. I remember riding in Washington, having a late story at the White House, and at 5:15, and getting the film, taking the magazine without it being put in a can, and hopping on the back of a motorcycle with the courier and driving him riding and beating lights where he could. I'm hanging on for dear life.
Oh yes, yes. Yes.
To the laboratory,
Yeah.
and having it processed, and then my editing it, and calling David and giving him a rundown on what I had edited. And
Boy, that's an image. I can recall days when I wasn't, not even close to the business, just going through school. That picture of a motorcycle guy racing from it wasn't even JFK then, it was Idlewild out in New York, getting a film off a plane and racing into 30
yes,
Rock
yes,
on a motorcycle.
Yeah. Yep. That, and they were marvelous motorcyclists. They formed a group.
Mm-hmm.
They were known as the Peacows, Press Couriers of Washington, and
They were good.
The major newspapers,
Mm-hmm.
the Washington Post, the Evening Star, the Daily News.
And they all needed it.
They all had couriers.
Motorcycle couriers. Now, have we seen both Chet and David? Is that what we've done? I think, if not,
No.
We'll have to put up both the pictures I culled off the internet of Chet Huntley in his office in New York.
Right.
And that roll-top desk, I sat right next to it. And he was as gentlemanly and,
Yep.
and welcoming to me, a new kid in New York, as a man could be. And then the other picture is the very, what would you call him, droll David Brinkley.
Yeah.
I think droll is a great
Droll
word
is a
to use to describe
good
him.
word.
Let's take the men one at a time. You got to know David Brinkley very well, very early on.
I knew him when he was poor.
Yeah, when he was poor, yeah. He said, I think this year to an interviewer before he died, that he got a chance to get into television real early when nobody was watching. I thought it was such a typical Brinkley comment.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, because he could learn at our expense and make his mistakes long before there was a huge audience to cash in on it.
And the interesting thing is that he was being modest, because he just was born
so
with
good,
an
so fast,
affinity.
so
He
soon.
had such a great feel for being able to speak intelligently, not to mind a pause. He didn't try to fill every second of airtime, but he had something to say when he did speak.
The praise, the eulogies, if you will, when David died this year, were so huge, describing this man's intelligence and the beauty of his writing.
He didn't go to college.
Yeah.
It was all hard work, and he did it.
I'm going to hand you something. It's a rather bulky item that you keep in your home, and this is a classic David Brinkley anecdote that he told closing a Huntley Brinkley report in 1964.
Yes.
And we have that preserved on videotape, so would you read it to us, right, and explain the circumstances?
All right. At my retirement party in 1981, David showed up carrying this. And it was a blow-up of the closer of Huntley Brinkley Report, September 29, 1964.
At the height of Huntley Brinkley.
And I had gone out in Goldwater's first whistle stop campaign. And Brinkley, because he and Chet alternated with them, Brinkley did this as the closer. Finally, associate producer Bill, I won't imitate him.
Right.
But, associate producer Bill Corrigan wants us to explain why we have no film of Senator Goldwater's whistle stops in Athens, Marietta, and Chillicothe, Ohio. It seems, says Corrigan, that our chartered plane could not land in Athens, Ohio to pick up the film because of the weather. The plane went to Zanesville. Our courier on the plane hired a car and went to Athens but missed the train. Corrigan, who had gotten off the train to make a phone call in Athens, also missed the train when the engineer blew a 3-minute warning whistle and departed less than a minute later. Our other courier in the moving train jumped off with the film and took a cab back to Athens, but he didn't know the plane was in Zanesville, and Corrigan had already rented a car and left for Chillicothe. So, as best we can make out tonight, Corrigan is in Cincinnati, the film is somewhere in Ohio, 2 couriers are lost, the candidate is in Cincinnati, and one of our aircraft is missing. Good night for NBC News.
Good night, Chet. Good night, David. And read the comment that's written in there when they gave that to you.
On the side,
Yeah.
handwritten, August 12, 1981. I was wrong.
Right.
Corrigan found his way back to NBC, where he lived happily ever after. The 2 couriers were never seen again. NBC paid for the plane and the rented car late. Corrigan's expense account was questioned, but eventually paid. The film, when we got it, wasn't worth a damn. And signed it David Brinkley.
What a prize, what a prize. Okay, so you were producing Huntley Brinkley out of Washington in
Yes.
those days, and in very close proximity with David. Later you got to New York as an overall producer, but not necessarily of Huntley Brinkley,
No.
but of NBC News. So you didn't know Chet quite as well.
No.
But it's obvious your admiration for Brinkley. How would you describe Chet Huntley? They were poles apart, 180 degrees.
Yes. Chet worked very hard at what he did. Worked harder than Brinkley did, although Brinkley worked. But it didn't come as quickly and easily to Huntley as it did to Brinkley, just the way it turned out. So that Chet was very kind and very warm to people who worked with him and all. And he enjoyed celebrity much more than David did. David was upset by
I can understand that, and I can see that now when I think back watching them, many years ago. He didn't relish the limelight.
No.
He was too professional, and he was doing his job.
Chet was ready to open his arms
Yeah.
to anyone who was going to put his name in the paper.
I said to you once that Huntley had almost movie star looks. He had
Yes.
that Gary Cooper rugged leading
Right.
man look,
Yeah.
and he knew it, didn't he?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and he
Absolutely.
played to it.
And I think he smoked a pipe because he found that it fit his image better.
Yes, when I met him, he was sitting at his desk smoking a pipe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, just as David, when, who was it? I forget. Camel News Caravan.
John Cameron Swayze.
David now and then would fill in the early days doing a Washington spot. And they sent him cases of camels
Oh boy.
so that he'd never be without one. And David would buy, I don't know, Lark or another brand and throw away or bring in and dump the camels out for anyone to take.
Oh boy.
And put the Lark
Put
in
his
the
smoke in
camel
there.
package.
Yeah, yeah.
But he would smoke those.
Yeah.
But yeah, Chet was warm, friendly, open, and truly enjoyed.
Well, you know what Don Hewitt said after David died, referring back to the Huntley-Brinkley report when NBC first had
Yeah.
the courage to try this new concept in television news. And weren't they 15 minutes themselves at the beginning?
Oh, sure.
Before it went to the half hour?
Yes, yes.
But he said, he was quoted at the time that David died, that Huntley-Brinkley said came at us like a freight train. You couldn't stop it. There was nothing we could do.
Yeah.
And they threw everything into the mix. They tried Roger Mudd and Bob Trout and everybody
Yeah.
to stop this guy, these two guys.
The chemistry was just right.
Fabulous.
They weren't close friends
No, no.
at all because
So different.
they were each so different.
Right. It's good they were in two different cities, yeah.
Yes, that's the way the magic worked.
Exactly right, yeah.
Once, neither one of them liked the idea of saying good night, David, good night, Chet.
Oh, yes, I've heard that story.
Neither liked it, but Reuben Frank, the executive producer, insisted on it.
I want to remind you of something that Reuben Frank said while you and I were there. You were, of course, working with Mr. Frank, or for him. But he sent out a memo to all of us at NBC, including those of us at the radio network. He was vehemently against any of us on air saying thank you to our correspondent for filing the story.
Yes.
You remember that?
Yes, I do.
And look at
he
it
was
today.
so right.
Look at it today. I don't want to mention names or personalities, but you've got people on CNN and Fox all the time just thanking.
Yes.
And Reuben is still alive and with us, and I see his occasional letters to the editor on a national basis, and he must be sitting there going crazy.
It's amateur night.
Yes. Another thing I want to ask you, a veteran of the network wars and the news business, we saw, when this war started this year, the embedded reporter.
Yeah.
A unique new concept. We saw the late David Bloom riding along on a tank repair type vehicle and so forth, dust in his face, hardly being able to see the camera. They continue with the term embedded. Now if a guy is traveling with John Kerry, the Democratic candidate,
he's embedded.
He's our embedded reporter. What is that all about? I mean, isn't it kind of overkill?
Using it for embedded with Kerry, there was no problem sending someone as long as you were willing.
It sounds like they have a secret agent in his camp.
So long as you were willing to pay the freight. But with the military, this was their phrase.
Yeah.
And they said, you want to send a man, we'll have him embedded with one of our units, and you can go every place we go. Well, that was not quite the full truth.
Yeah. I think it was a term meant to glorify something which is not that out of the ordinary.
No.
I mean, you're a reporter traveling with a unit.
Vietnam was the best example. Reporters, the best reporting was done solely by the individual reporter making a contact and going with them. You could go any place you wanted in Vietnam.
You were in harm's way. You were in the line of fire.
Yeah.
You could have been shot, and some were.
Yeah, but you were there of your own volition.
Yeah.
And the military couldn't do anything about it. They might not be nice to you.
Yeah.
But it was your privilege to be there as long as you were once you were credentialed.
Well, some of those embedded Vietnamese earned Pulitzer Prizes, and well deserved.
Yes.
Too, because they really were putting their lives on the line. So, I want to go forward through a couple of press pass, like license plate pictures, if we can. We have a picture of you standing in front of the Berlin Wall, Bill.
Yeah.
Would you give us the time frame on that, and what was that all about?
That was sometime in 61, 62 era.
Okay.
And
were you struck by the wall? I mean, was it something that?
Oh yes, it hit.
Impressive.
Well, the first time you saw it, it hit you right in the pit of the stomach.
Yeah.
Because it was.
Well, it was a symbol of oppression.
Massive.
Yeah.
And it was dirty because it was never thought of as something that was attractive.
Not meant to be.
And
meant to keep people
the barbed wire,
Yeah.
razor wire on top,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
When you were there, what was your capacity then? You were.
When this picture was made, I was, at that time I was in New York. Wait a minute. No. At that time I was in Washington.
Okay, back in Washington. All right.
And I was manager.
This must have been during Huntley Brinkley days.
It was before Huntley Brinkley.
Before that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. They had a great run.
It was in the very early 60s.
I got another shot of here, which would be the next in line, of you with a then very famous NBC correspondent who had a very particular style.
Yes.
Very slow. Irving R. Levine.
Indeed.
I think the man is alive and teaching
He's
journalism.
teaching over at the University of Miami.
Uh-huh. Oh, and he's nearby. He's
Yes.
nearby.
Mhm. And healthy and well.
Yeah.
And I suspect that's been his natural style for years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was laconic.
And
Yeah.
my kids used to imitate him. They thought it was wonderful. It had reached the point of his sing-songing.
It was sing-song, yeah. Yeah.
Irving R. Levine, NBC News, Moscow.
Moscow. It just was long drawn
But
out.
then he was transferred to Rome, and went right into the same melody.
That was his trademark, just like David had his style.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
a style. It was a
It
style.
was a style, and he did it.
But he was good at what he did.
He was very good at what he did.
Yeah. Okay, listen, we are in wrap-up time, believe it or not. If you can believe that, we've been sitting here that long. As we go out, and I thank you for joining us, and as always, produced here in the studios of METV in Bradenton, Florida, and seen locally on Channel 21 and down in Sarasota on Channel 20. Just quickly, Bill Corrigan, what do you think of the news business today compared to when, I mean, I've been out of it for 13 years, you've been out of it for more than 20.
22 years,
Yeah.
and so glad that I left when I did.
Oh, a lot of us say that. Yeah.
Because the character of the business was changing so. They were just getting into the happy talk.
Right.
And
You know, our colleague Paul Duke says that they've crossed the line between news and entertainment. And it's blurred, and he doesn't know what it is anymore.
local was the biggest offender in that
That's right.
sort of thing.
Eyewitness news.
But
Ho, ho, ho.
no, I wouldn't have lasted another 2 years, and I would have been gone.
I think, well, when I left in 1989, there was a bunch of us said we were glad to walk away. We thought we had it when it was best.
Yes.
Of course, you'll get big disagreement today from people who are in it and tell you we're wrong, that it's fine and everything's great. But we were there, and you know that was.
I'm glad I was there.
I'm glad you were too.
And at the time that I was there, because I thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah.
And Lord, it exposed me to so much.
Yeah.
I went round as general manager. I went around the world every year.
Oh, yeah. Great opportunity. Listen, we are out of time, William.
Sorry.
That's okay. No, we'll run another hour someday. But thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting.
William T., right? I got it right?
Yeah,
William
you
T.
have.
Bill Corrigan. I'm Don Blair, as usual. Thanks for turning in.